All right, putting it all together. Remember, you drill down to your core. Highfalutin statements up in the air, they're worthless. You can't leverage a statement of I execute or I listen. How do you leverage that? Create the petals. Remember the 2/3 rule on the value idea. Rank them so that you can figure out which one to work on and do that walkabout. The walkabout is where I went out and talked to the 400 internet providers. Without that, we wouldn't have learned anything. So, do I use my own poison? Yeah, I do. I'm taking the Sunflower nationwide. We're launching it with a publisher in the second quarter of 2012. Why am I doing this? I don't need this for money. I'm doing this because the United States has unemployment right now effectively of about 16%. And I'd like small businesses and self-employed and unemployed people to be able to have a how-to book. The whole thing is a how-to book to see if we can bootstrap the America back to the way it used to be. So I used my own sunflower to do a sunflower on the sunflower. And when I started to think about that, I said, well, how would you market the book in an innovative way? I mean, here's a dumb way to do it. You just put it on Amazon and hope that somebody finds it. And you sell maybe 1,000, who knows. I'm not interested in 1,000. I'm interested in selling 5 to 10 million books around the United States. Not for the money so much, but for spreading the book. So I decided that there was kind of 3 other avenues that we would look at. We would form a media company, and the media company would be doing books and workbooks and websites and iPad apps. But also, how would you actually get the book out there? And then I had a lucky event happen. You need luck always. The lucky event was I met the CEO of Easter Seals, Jim Williams. And you say, well, what is Easter Seals? In fact, probably no one in the room knows what Easter Seals does, I bet you. In fact, that's his challenge. He's a $1.2 billion nonprofit that nobody knows what he does. In fact, what he does is everything from autism to Alzheimer's to every neurological problem that people, returning vets, might have. And not only that, but they're an organization of 28,000 people and 500,000 volunteers. And they have 800 learning centers around the United States. They're a really big organization. So what happened when I met Jim, we liked each other. And after many conversations over multiple meetings, he challenged me and said, I have 3 problems, Rob. One problem is no one knows what Easter Seals does. Second problem is people in the age group of 18 to 35, let's say, they don't have a clue what we do and they don't send any money. The people that send money are 55 years and up and they're dying. And the government is sending me less money. So the tea leaves don't look good here. He said, can you solve any of those problems with your sunflower? And this is a little challenge, you know. And I said, no, not only am I going to solve it, I'm going to do it in 3 hours. So name your time. And he brought all of his executives to a little meeting on a lake outside of Chicago. He had the VP of this and the VP of that. There were like a lot of VPs, and they were all in the room, and Jim was in the room. And I started asking him questions about his core competency. Remember, drilling down to the core competency. So I said, well, tell me how you actually solicit the donors. And he says, well, we send out 67 million pieces of solicitation every 6 months. I said, is that emails? What is that? No, it's snail mail. Paper. I said, it's paper. Is all of it paper? He said, yeah, it's all paper. I said, well, that's interesting. And so you do have a core competency, first of all. You have a donor base that he must have a donor base of 67 million names somewhere to send this out. And you have the abilities to create the paper. So you have some competencies. However, I knew he didn't have the competencies that he needed because remember that age group of 18 to 35, they're not actually opening any of the snail mail. They get their stuff through text messages, emails, Twitters, Facebooks, blah, 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 blah. So that's a non sequitur. That's not going to work with what he's doing. I then asked him, I drilled down one more step. I asked him, let me ask you a question. if I were $1 million donor, what would you do? And he said, I'd sit down with you and I'd try to find out what your interest is. And I said, well, let's just say my interest is autism. And he said, well, I'll tell you all about autism then. And I said, well, that's really good. I said, what if I was a $100,000 donor? Would you do the same thing? He said, yeah, I would. And what about $5,000? He said, no. What about $5 donor? No. I said, so why don't you think that the $5 donor, the $100 donor, and the $5,000 donor, why wouldn't it work just as well to have their interest, their exact interest tickled, rather than some amorphous thing saying that we're Easter seals? The reason it works for the $1 million is because you spent the time to figure out what that person's interest was, and you matched what you did to that interest. I said, this whole matching to the interest, or targeting, if you will, is doable with today's technology. You don't have it. It's not in your basement of Easter seals, but it can be built, and that will become your core competency. And you will change Easter seals almost overnight when you have that core competency. By the way, I'm working with him to do now a software company to actually implement and he's working with me to distribute the book, the workbook, in the 800 learning centers around the United States and continuously advertising it and promoting it, as well as putting it into the 22,000 people in the company and the 500,000. And I forgot to tell you, the biggest thing is they service 27 million people. So he's also agreed to introduce it to the 27 million people. So that's an innovative way of actually selling a book, which is not really my interest, but getting the book out there. Some other innovative ideas are Chamber of Commerce. There's lots of Chamber of Commerces around the United States. They work with small businesses. This whole concept is about reinventing a small business. What about incubators? There are thousands of incubators around the United States, same thing. What about corporations? Remember that Medline guy, the $9 billion corporation? After he couldn't answer my question about the core competency, he invited me in to work with his senior people. And I said, you know, I'm not a consultant. I don't ask for pay. I'll do this under one condition. If I prove to you the effectiveness, then you're going to market the book. You're going to help distribute the book around the United States. And you know, he obviously has some wherewithal to do that. So this is me doing a sunflower on a sunflower. All right, shameless marketing. I have an earlier book you can buy, Smart Ups, Sunflowers in It. It's chapter 3. The new book is out in 2012. Here's my emails. Here's Tim's email. He's in the same office. If you have an innovative idea and you've done your sunflower and you're sure it has a high value proposition, by all means, give me a jingle. But don't give me a jingle otherwise. Yeah, that's a good question. The question is, how do you apply the value equation concept to sort of luxury items? Or for that matter, you didn't ask it, but it could be also service items like buying a cup of coffee. It didn't work well on that. I'm not going to tell you that I can force fit it into that, because the value equation is trying to reduce something down to money made or money saved for the customer, and you're not doing either one of them in that luxury kind of item. So there you're looking at other things that tickle the fancy of the ego of the person that's actually buying the product. So it's a different kind of value, and it's a subjective value. I'm not as comfortable myself with those, and I don't do those kind of businesses. I've never done them. I stick with the value equations where I have hard dollars that I can knock out and I can talk about, because it's real simple then to sell. You go into the customer and say, I saved you $500, it cost $100. Where do you sign? But the other items are, they're more ego-driven, right? It's a more subjective kind of type of a value, if you will. Okay, so the question is kind of a two-tiered. You have an environment in which there are users for the customers, and then the customer is your customer. So how does the value equation work in that area? Well, there's two value equations in that area. One is, first of all, your value equation with your customer. Is there a value or isn't there of the ilk that I was talking about? The second one you need to look at, by the way, is between the customer, your customer, and the users. If there's no value equation there between the customer and the user, it's not going to fly. Because if there's no value there, there's going to be no value that can go upstream to you. So if there's poor value between user and customer, there'll be relatively poor value between you and that customer. So you got to kind of drill down to one more level. That's what I would do in that setting. I don't look for venture capital. Right now, I 100% deal only with bootstrap companies. These are companies that are building their company off their sweat and off their own cash flow.
They need some capital.
And a little bit. I mean, they get that from friends and family. Like Comply got about $200,000 from friends and family, and that's our working capital. I can give you a whole lot of other Comply stories. I've done a lot of those companies. You may recognize the name Right Now Technology out of Bozeman. That was a bootstrapped company that started with a husband and wife. Again, small amount of money. It's now grown to a rather big company. Why I like bootstrap companies is you don't have to teach the entrepreneur the value of money. They know the value of money because they don't have any money. And if they don't actually sell, then they don't eat, and they can't pay their employees. And so you don't have to teach anybody in a bootstrap company about money. Whereas in a venture-backed company, where they're given money, and they're using other people's money, but I call that opium. They actually get addicted to the opium. They actually think foolishly that they are a company. They're not a company. They're actually just spending other people's money. You know, an example of a non-company in mind that you may have heard of is called Groupon. It's a rather big entity in Chicago. Hundreds of millions of dollars in revenues, maybe. I don't know. They keep redoing their revenue statements. But hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. But they lose $500 million a year. What kind of company is that? You know, my little company is only doing $2 million in revenue, but it's all profit. You know, it's $1 million in profit on the $2 million. Which is the better company? The little $2 million company with the $1 million profit, or the hundreds of million dollar company that loses $500 million? You know, I can tell you that the Groupon guys are going to make a lot of money, I'm sure, by doing some stupid IPO on it. But my company, Comply, is a much better company. And in the long run, it will look like that and be that.